I just had a very strange relationship with food. It dominated my thinking all the time.
And I would sit and I would force myself to finish a kilo of pasta and the chips and the pie and the cool drink I had bought.
It was such unconscious eating because there was so much emotion and so much fear and pain that was going on inside me that I didn't want to look at and deal with or feel, that I just suppressed it.
Up until now, we have dealt primarily with substance addictions. This week, we venture into the new territory of process addictions. Compulsive overeating has been exposed as a potentially deadly illness in recent years, with massive damages and consequences impacting not only on the individual, but also the family and society as a whole. With drugs and alcohol, abstinence is a fundamental element in order to live a life of recovery. However, with food, total abstinence is obviously impossible. Wendy, Pam, and Kirsty expose this disorder and share their experiences.
I don't remember when I started using food, although my mother tells me it was about when I was about 6. And my parents' marriage was in trouble, and shortly after that my father left, went to Johannesburg, and my parents divorced. I remember feeling very lonely, having no friends. I was the littlest and felt very kind of left out. I don't remember eating at all, but I certainly do later. I certainly remember being a fat little girl.
My addiction started when I was about between 8 and 10 years old, as far as I can remember. I was molested by my grandfather, and I was too scared to tell anyone. I was terrified. And I can still remember as a young girl thinking that there was nowhere I could turn to. I always felt that I needed to be more jovial, more excitable, more naughty, more sexy, in order to get any kind of attention and affection from anyone. And it's around that age that I found solace in food. The food felt like protection, like coming home.
When I was at nursery school, I started feeling very uncomfortable and didn't feel like I fitted in anywhere. And my main friend was my food. And in primary school again, I didn't feel part of. I really struggled to make friends. I would say I classed myself in primary school as a bully, also very sarcastic, and I'd nick a bit of money out my mum's wallet, stop at the cafe, buy sweets and things, have a few on the way to school, and when I got to school, I'd use them as a form of manipulation and bribery to make a few friends, even if it was just for a short period of time.
We put huge expectations on our children, the way that they need to be perfectionistic and competitive. This leads to a lot of girls feeling not good enough and out of control. And they manage these feelings of inadequacy and out of controlness around their food.
As I got older and I started putting on more and more weight, the weight actually became my protective mechanism. And I can remember it making me feel excited to be alone in a room with some food. Anytime I helped someone, anytime I was helped, anytime I had an argument with someone, or anytime someone was friendly towards me, anything would be a trigger as long as there was an emotional contingent. I have had bouts with alcohol. It was an icebreaker. It was a social lubricant. It's what gave me courage to go out in my tight jeans. And it gave me the confidence to speak to guys and get out there and be jovial and happy. And when inside, I was terrified. I was terrified to go out of my house. I was terrified to see people, see friends, meet new people. Scared me a lot. So alcohol was a bit of a problem, but I already had my drug, and I tried every means possible, from every diet on the planet that you could think of, to abusing laxatives, so that anything that comes in goes out and I'm cleansed, to even considering taking something like cocaine, because I know you lose your appetite on cocaine, to over-exercising ridiculously, hours in the gym every day, considering becoming a bulimic. I couldn't control myself. Probably around 2005, I was nearing the end of my relationship, my long-term relationship. Some people had broken into the house and held us at gunpoint, and I was assaulted. And it brought my world crashing down around me. I just wanted to hide and disappear. And that's when the serious isolation began. I would start locking myself away and closing the curtains, phone off the hook. No one could get hold of me, no one could come near me. And it's around that time that I first thought that it could just be easier to take a handful of pills and just let it all go away, because there was just too much pain that I didn't understand.
I didn't feel part of. I didn't feel like I fitted in anywhere. I really struggled to make friends. It's when I remember that I started hiding food. When I went to high school, again for the first sort of 2 years it was very unsettling, didn't feel part of, didn't have friends. Used to ask people if I could sit with them at breaks and have to sit on my own. And then sort of made a few friends, and that was great, so we used to sit together for a while. And a rumour got spread around school, and I was at an all-girls school, that I was a lesbian. So the few friends that I had disappeared in a puff of smoke. So that I found that really absolutely destroyed me. And my ED just went berserk. Whenever I've had really tough times in my life, my eating disorder has flared up to just monster proportions. I'm a chef by trade. A while ago I worked at a game farm. And while I was working on the game farm, again I fell in love. And again my ED went quiet, and I went to gym and I stopped smoking, and I thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to be happy. The guy dated somebody else, and the same thing happened again. And this is my insanity. The same thing over and over and over again, the expectations of what I expect and what I want. And when that happened, I stopped going to gym. I started smoking again. My addiction to marijuana got stronger and stronger when I was there. And things, I think, really from that point in my life, my addiction really started accelerating. I got a job in Knysna, fabulous job. I'm living in one of the most beautiful towns in the world. I used to work like 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, sometimes 14 hours. That was so I could hide away from who I am, so I didn't have to deal with any of the issues that were going on for me. And I'd be home by 9:30, curtains closed, TV on, marijuana, cigarettes, food. Then I got retrenched. And I was retrenched for a very good reason, because my life was beyond messed up. I was very depressed and just totally gone. So I'd stay up a lot later, binging and smoking and doing whatever, sleep late, and then start earlier.
It's not using food in a loving or kind way at all. There's not a positive relationship with food. But I think food is just the symbol of how they feel about themselves and the system in which they surround themselves.
My mother said to me when I was a teenager, "You're a compulsive overeater." And to me, those words were the most shameful words my mother had ever spoken to me. I think I became aware that I was binging in my teens, and I would solve it with heavy restriction. So I was a serial dieter, so I was always on some diet or other. And even when I starved and weighed 58 kgs, it wasn't good enough for me. It was never going to be good enough. Huge self-loathing. It was always an issue. What I was going to eat, when I was going to eat, how much I was going to eat was always an issue. How much would people see me eat? And buffets, the total worst. How could I eat without them noticing and then have more without them noticing? And if you stand near the table and talk, people don't notice so much. I was always the one next to the table, and then I just moved down when I finished this lot, you know? So that you don't go away with a huge plate looking like, God, what is she eating? If you just quietly sit, you know, you can take off quite a lot. I mean, I would order a meal so that I could have the chips that came with it. I wasn't really interested in the other thing. I just wanted chips. fried chips. The more, the merrier. And I mean, the joy of going overseas and discovering that they live on them, you know, and you go to Belgium and they bring you, you order a plate of chips, they bring you like a bowl. I thought, wow, why did I move here? My normal day would have been I would go and have breakfast, and I would eat the other person's breakfast who was dieting or not eating. And then by a little break, I would be hungry. And again, I would have a whole lot of sandwiches, and then lunch would come, and then I'd have lunch. And I would consider myself not to have overeaten. Then would come tea time. I would have not one home-baked tea, which was my share, but I would have 3, sometimes 4. And then normally by about 4, I would be hungry, and I would eat prior to supper. It would be grazing in the kitchen. Then there'd be other chocolates for later that I'd bought. So these binges were very planned. There's another secret stash of chocolate in my drawer. I'd hide them in different drawers because my children used to realize where the food stuff was hidden. I was always hungry.
They are generally overweight or obese. They also eat on their feelings.
And then you get your eating disorders where people overindulge, where you have complete overeating and your body mass index is way over 25 and you might be obese and you indulge the whole time, usually carbohydrate high food.
My father is a medical profession, so for him seeing me gaining weight and the health risks of high blood pressure, diabetes, heart attack, plus the fact that I was a heavy smoker, instilled a huge amount of fear within him. The one night I smoked a lot, binge eaten for a few hours and thought, oh, I'm not going to sleep, took a sleeping pill and an anti-anxiety, and I stood up and I nearly fell over and I was like, whoa, nice feeling. It's only an addict who gets that.
My academic career has pretty much been put on hold. I've burnt a lot of bridges by not doing the work that was expected of me and what I said I would do. So there are a lot of relationship and career consequences. What I have learned is that not only was my mum and my sister incredibly worried about me all the time, but they also didn't know me. I'd been lying and cheating my way through life for so long that they had no idea what kind of a person I really was.
So my health's been really badly compromised. I discovered I had diabetes, depression, so increase in weight, lowering of self-esteem, my fitness, my ability to do any form of exercise. My breathing became compromised. So it would get to the stage where, I don't know, when I suddenly discovered I can't sit down on the floor and get up again. Then they discovered that I had a condition called sleep apnea, which actually happens with large people.
If they were obese, there would be physical implications, physical problems that could lead to heart problems, blood problems, diabetes. There's all kinds of problems. Never mind the emotional problems and the psychological problems that come with the eating disorder.
I didn't know how to let go of the food. I just knew that I needed to, and I was desperately, desperately unhappy, and I would cry as I ate. And I stuffed myself. I would just sob, but I would still do it. And then afterwards I would feel suicidal. I would want to throw up and not be able to even do that. You can't even be a bulimic. What is wrong with you? You just have to be stuck as this ghastly fat person. The only hope is to die. You have to die. And I'd want to die so badly. And I'm a diabetic, a type 2 diabetic who was insulin dependent. And I would have the means of my destruction in my bag. And one day I remember dialing up so much insulin that it would definitely send you away into a coma, if not dead. And I had the injection needle in my arm with my finger on the plunger, ready. And the only thing that stopped me dying was my children.
For the older generation, I think, there does come a place of desperation where things have gotten so bad for them that they need to do something about it.
I ended up talking to my aunt and just telling her how absolutely a mess my life is. And during the talking and the tears, I looked up at her and I said, oh my God. She said, what? I said, I'm an addict. And she just smiled. She said, yeah, you are. And she said, there are people who can help you. There are places. I said, are you serious? She said, yes.
Every day of the last year of active addiction, I just wanted to desperately stop, but would do the same thing over and over. So I knew there was a problem, I just didn't know what it was. And I knew I wanted to stop. I just figured I didn't have the willpower. I was a terrible person because I couldn't control myself. And I knew the week before I came into treatment that it was time to figure something out and fix me. The first 10 days I was completely in denial and very resistant to treatment. Thereafter, I started peeling away the layers of denial slowly but surely and starting to share little bits of my life. And it was in treatment, in my 4th week of treatment, that I actually broke down in tears. And that release was amazing. And it's very painful, that release, but it's also invigorating at the same time because you can see that there's a shift and there's forward movement and there's awareness and understanding. And it's an amazing feeling to know that there's a bit of hope. In primary care, I learned to start identifying emotion, or at least to start allowing emotion to surface. Learning how to cry, learning that I wasn't a bad person, learning the theory behind addiction, because I really had no idea how debilitating it can be and how it affects my life and my family's and those around me. I did secondary care, which is behavioral reconditioning, so to speak, where you go to a long-term treatment facility. I went for 3 months, and you really start analyzing your behavior and start changing that. And it's there that the magic really began to happen. I started discovering that there are things that I actually didn't like, even if someone else liked it. And I could start identifying why I was doing certain things. So why I was binging during certain times of the day or at certain events, why I was feeling uncomfortable in certain situations. I started seeing how I had damaged my family, start seeing the massive consequences that had built up around my life and how I had barricaded myself from proper healthy relationships, friendships, love. I also went to tertiary care, which is just a safe environment where you can start working again, start interacting with the outside, but still coming home to a safe space. And that I found difficult. In treatment, you have this little cushion around you. And now I had to start cooking for myself, fending for myself again.
Primary for me was a very easy time. In secondary, I think my biggest challenge was letting go and letting God. But handing over and letting my higher power look after me was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It was a hard journey, but not as hard as going back to where I came from. I ended up doing 14 months within the treatment facility. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be in the space I am today.
You don't have to believe any set belief, because we all acknowledge that we need a power greater than ourselves to recover. I found the power greater than myself before I found the recovery. And I believe it was the power greater than myself that tripped me up and led me to recovery. At that time, when I found God, I wanted God to, please God, make me thin and still let me eat chocolate cake. Of course, that isn't the way it was done, you know. As I say, you're not airlifted out of the river. You have to swim to shore, but you're taught. So recovery was not on my terms. It was very much on God's terms. And I had to surrender to that. And that means not just saying it, but doing it. It means doing what you're told. It means not knowing better than everybody else. Because I never, ever, ever want to go back there. I'd never want to go back into that pit.
Society and the media are becoming more aware of what eating disorders are really about, that they're not just about food. It's not just a poor relationship with food that just needs to be gotten over, that it is actually a mental, emotional, psychological and spiritual illness that needs to be addressed.
We help the person to heal physically in terms of their addiction, in terms of their dysfunction, in terms of their broken relationships, but heal their spirituality, the foundations, the roots, so that they can begin to live more honestly and openly and with integrity.
Well, physically, I feel a lot healthier. I am sleeping at night. I look healthier. I have lost weight, but I have learned that it's not about the weight. Mentally, I'm still working on that. I still think quite negatively about myself, but that's 25 odd years of negative indoctrination that I have to peel away, and that doesn't happen overnight. Spiritually, I had no spiritual bone in my body at all before I joined this program. I have learned to embrace a higher power, the consciousness of good, just so that I can reach out and I'm not alone anymore every day. Yeah, I now have discovered that healthy relationships mean I can say no and still be loved. I can be honest about what I do in my daily life and what I've done, and it's okay. My relationships are based on trust. So I won't change my life for anything now, because I like being in touch with people, and I like it when people say, "Are you okay?" and they actually mean it, and I can say no and they say, "Well, how can I help you?"
Emotionally, I'm a much happier person, and I used to have the odd happy day. I now wake up in a good space 90% of the time. I used to be incredibly sarcastic, and that was one of my barriers to protect me from people. I don't do that anymore. My head's quiet now. I call it free airtime. There's just this space. For me, nature is my higher power. So there is something greater than me out there.
Well, the biggest challenge, of course, is myself. One of the things I learned in recovery was that I'm no better or no worse than anyone else. There are things that I have to do in my life to keep myself safe. One of them is I have to have a plan of eating. And I have a toolbox of tools to help me through the day. And I check in with myself. Am I using my tools? Am I reading recovery literature to help me? Am I contacting other addicts? Am I going to meetings? Am I doing some service? And the life that I'm intended to live, that I'm now living, is the most amazing life that you could ever have. I've got everything a person could wish for.
I really want to be successful in my career because I have let that slide over the last couple of years, and I'm working hard at that now. My greatest hope is that I can continue on my recovery journey and become the happy person I know that's there.
I don't think a lot into the future because I'm learning to live for today. I am noticing that I have a role to play with regards to food addicts. I have something to say. I have a message to give. So my plan is to be very active in 12-step groups, to do service, to do what I can where I can. I also see my future as one as drawing more and more closer and closer to God, as close as I can be.
If anyone is in the situation where I was a year ago, I would say that they need to reach out. It's the most important thing. It is the scariest thing because there's a lot of shame and embarrassment associated with this disease.
Get help. There are so many options out there. Different things work for different people. And you do need to find the one that works for you.
It doesn't matter how many times you've tried and failed. Try again. Try this last thing. Keep coming. Keep coming back to 12-step programs, to recovery. You will find recovery. It is there for everyone. It's not just there for me. I believe that. That's my message.
Next week, we take a look at more types of eating disorders Less well understood, but equally devastating in their consequences. These are bulimia and anorexia. Our hope is that after watching these programs, anyone affected by the consequences of addiction, be it the addict themselves, family members, friends, work colleagues and communities at large, will better understand addiction and be able to make informed decisions regarding seeking help, advice, counseling and support.